Like the Concord, my block was the bridge. That was like what Uptown is. If you know anything about Washington Heights in the late '90s and early 2000s, that's what Weeks Ave was back in the day. That was the bridge. That's where everybody went to buy their weight and stuff. There was some real big characters that came up out of there. So I was raised in the midst of a crack den. Not my house per se, but just the area and everything that was around me, from my uncles to my aunts to my moms, and my grandmother was just a spiritual person. I always went to church, so she had me morally sustained, like going to church, Sunday school, and all that. So in the midst of all that, I always had great morals and how to make great decisions in the midst of the jungle that I was living in. That's why I'm still here today.
So then now, you said 89, you Cam, you meet. And you hang. So when is it, how does the crew progress? How does it get tighter, the relationship between you and Cam? How does it grow?
It grew after Cam and them was good at basketball. Everybody went to college for playing basketball. When they left at senior,
Jim Jones was in the midst of an unplanned circumstance that developed organically around him. Moment when Max B returned home, the festivities got underway. People have been aware of Jim and Max's past for many years. A past replete with betrayed trust, unchangeable words, and scars that never completely healed. Fans maintained the suspense even as both men went on with their lives, anticipating any opportunity for them to meet paths once more. Everyone was curious about Jim's actions, words, and the reactions of those around him when Max B's welcome home event began. At that moment, my attention moved to Dave East since his decision to attend Max B's dinner caused the entire scenario to escalate into a controversy that the internet was eager to capitalize on. Because of Mino's choice to skip Max's party, the talk had already begun before Dave ever entered the room. Mino made it apparent that he wasn't coming because of the close bond he had developed with Jim over the years. Not because he had an issue with Max. They were involved in more than simply music and business. Jim had been in his house. Jim was familiar with his family. They had a genuine and intimate bond. Mino believed that it went against his morals to appear anywhere associated with someone Jim still had problems with. He wasn't picking sides to stir things up, because of the kind of relationship they had developed. He was opting for respect. Jim was able to grasp his explanation with ease. Because loyalty takes on a new meaning when it develops over time through relationships with family, in real life, and not only in the workplace. However, when Dave East was spotted at the meal the very following day, things got more problematic. When the images were released, the internet did what it always does. It made the story seem more complex than it actually was. Dave was accused of being disloyal, disrespecting Jim, and secretly taking sides. They were all unaware of Dave and Jim's closeness. They were all unaware that Dave had spoken to Jim before the dinner in an effort to avoid coming out as disrespectful. Before the internet attempted to incite discord between them, Jim had known Dave for many years. Jim had spent time with Dave's children. Dave had observed Jim's respectful treatment of his mother. Their relationship was more profound than music, interviews, or anything the general world could see. Because of this, the discussion they had prior to supper was more significant than anything the commentators wrote. Everything became apparent after the podcast audio leak was made public. Jim could clearly see Dave's point of view as he listened to him dissect his entire line of reasoning. Dave claimed that although he was never in Max's company in that manner, he had a personal relationship with him through mutual acquaintances. He claimed that after receiving a direct invitation, he felt compelled to speak with Jim about it right away. Dave didn't want anyone else to tell Jim that he had attended the dinner. He didn't want it to appear as though he had made a covert move. He spoke to him in order to respect a relationship that held true meaning for him rather than to request permission. Jim didn't blow up. He did not become enraged. He paid attention because he knew that men may have opposing viewpoints without betraying one another. Jim even stated on the podcast that it is possible for two things to be true simultaneously. Dave could be concerned about Jim's feelings while also wanting Max to return home. Jim might have a personal history with Dave, and Max might perhaps have a connection of their own. However, the internet was ill-equipped to deal with such mature reasoning. Drama was what they desired. They desired a brawl. They desired a distinct squad to support. They were unprepared for the notion that mature men might respect one another even if they didn't agree. The internet, however, didn't wait. Dave claimed that his phone exploded as soon as the dinner images were made public, as if he had done something crazy. People were attempting to magnify the occasion by calling and messaging each other, in an attempt to incite conflict where none existed. Some even attempted to fabricate a tale that Dave and Mino attended the Jets game together. Mino explained it right away. At the stadium, he didn't even see Dave. It was illogical to believe that the more than 80,000 people in the building arrived as a group. However, that is the nature of the internet. People don't look for the truth. They look for stories that grab people's attention. Jim sat and watched the events unfold in real time as all of this ruckus continued to escalate. And he maintained his composure rather than adding to the drama. He was aware that his relationship with Dave was not understood by the internet. He was aware that not everyone had the whole story. Jim has experienced actual conflicts, actual setbacks, and actual loyalty tests. He understands the distinction between independence and betrayal. He understands the distinction between being disrespectful and being honest because of this. Jim didn't approach Dave like a man who had crossed a line when he explained himself on the program. He handled him as though he truly cared about and understood him. Dave started talking about how quickly the fans in the streets turned against him while they were in the podcast room. People were applauding Max B's comeback one moment, and then they were calling Dave a fake for attending a dinner to which he had been invited. Dave stated that although he anticipated the presence of cameras, he didn't anticipate the entire affair feeling scripted. People were moving as if they were filming a movie. The lights were bright and phones were out. At that moment, Dave understood that someone was going to spill something. The room didn't feel natural, so even though he didn't know when it would happen, he knew it was coming. Someone seemed to be more interested in content than in a celebration. Jim was silent for a while after Dave stated that. He understood exactly what Dave was trying to say. He was aware of how quickly circumstances in their society might get perverted, particularly when those who weren't even present began to add their own interpretations. It brought back memories of all the years Jim had to put up with fabricated rumors, inflated animosity, and people using his name to make waves on the internet. He therefore didn't criticize Dave's gait. If anything, he had a deeper understanding of him. The discussion also covered Jim's long relationship with Max and how, despite Max's stated desire for peace, Jim wasn't compelled to share that sentiment on someone else's timeline. Jim made it very clear that he wasn't hurrying anything that didn't originate from his own heart, even though he would want for New York to be united. He refused to be coerced into forgiveness by the internet. He refused to let those who weren't present during the actual conflict make choices on his behalf. Jim was open about the fact that his problems with Max were serious and could not be resolved with a simple handshake or a picture. It was more profound, and only he could choose the end of that chapter. They have honored that. That was respected by Mino, and the folks in that room realized that mature men don't follow orders, even though the internet didn't. When the time is appropriate, they move. The tone of the room changed as the discussion continued, revealing the depth of history that these guys shared. Jim Jones didn't need to speak louder or go around in circles to express himself. His very presence served as a reminder to everyone of the gravity of the situation. Sometimes people forget that Jim and Max were more than just two artists who had a falling out. They used to be tight, developed movements together, okay? And had similar aspirations of conquering New York in their own unique ways. It wasn't just a typical industry dispute when net relationship broke down, because it felt personal and both parties carried their own grief from it. It became a topic of conversation for years.